Paul McCartney recently opened up about how he truly felt regarding Yoko Ono's involvement during some of the Beatles' final recording sessions as a band. Speaking on a recent episode of his podcast, McCartney, A Life in Lyrics, the 81-year-old musician described Ono, who was married to the late John Lennon, as a disruptive presence during the making of the 1968 album commonly known as the White Album. He explained that the band had a well-established working method that involved only the four members, producer George Martin, and an engineer. That setup had always worked for them, and her presence altered that dynamic. McCartney acknowledged that neither he nor fellow bandmates Ringo Starr and George Harrison were particularly confrontational individuals. As a result, they approached Ono's presence as something they simply had to accept. Since it was clearly something Lennon wanted, they chose not to oppose it, even if none of them were especially comfortable with the situation. Lennon later married Ono in 1969. The couple had a son, Sean, in 1975. Lennon also had an older son, Julian, from his previous marriage to Cynthia Lennon. Tragically, John Lennon was killed in 1980 at the age of 40 outside the Dakota in New York City by Mark David Chapman. McCartney said the group tolerated Ono's frequent appearances in the studio because they felt a responsibility to uphold the image and work ethic of the Beatles. To them, being in the band was more than just a job. It was their identity. When they weren't on tour, they were recording, and when they recorded, they were writing music. That was the rhythm of their professional lives. Although fans have often pointed to Lennon and Ono's relationship as a primary reason for the group's 1970 breakup, McCartney reiterated that the band was already headed toward dissolution by the time they were recording the White Album. He noted that Lennon's relationship with Ono naturally shifted the internal dynamics of the group during that period of transition. McCartney's recent remarks align with what he said in a 2012 interview with David Frost. At that time, he emphasized that Ono wasn't the cause of the breakup. According to him, the band was already falling apart, and Ono's influence simply introduced Lennon to new ways of thinking. McCartney believed that this change resonated deeply with Lennon, and it became clear that he was ready to move on. In McCartney's view, Lennon's departure was inevitable.